if you want to use that data set in an AI model right now, I think a lot of organizations are just saying, hey, let's just go do it. Don't worry about tracking the data so much. In the financial service industries, I don't think y'all have that ability to do that, right? You have really strong regulatory requirements. How do we track the flow of this process? How do we assert that we didn't include some information in this model training that wasn't supposed to be included in there? And how do we prove it to our auditors? So we don't even have to be talking about LLMs, right? We can talk about models that have been used for a long time for fraud detection. How do we know that fraud detection is conformant and that's a correct model? How do we prove that to our auditors? Right? There's internal testing that happens on those models to make sure that they're working as intended.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Grizz Griswold of FINOS. Hope you're doing well. Today, I have with me Cole Kennedy. He's the founder and CEO of TestifySec. Cole, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I just ended the 4th of July weekend, so feeling well rested and getting back to work this week.
I feel today's Tuesday, right? I feel like it's Monday over and over again, but I'm glad you're right. Where are you located?
I'm actually in northern Alabama. So TestifySec, we're fully 100% remote for two reasons. One, we were founded during COVID, so we really didn't have that much of a choice. The reason is to get the engineers to work on the type of problems that we're working on. It's really important to be able to source those from anywhere that you need them, right? So yeah, it's been working great for us. And then I get to stay here in beautiful northern Alabama with a lake in my background. So it's been great for us and our employees.
Very good. And I'm in New York now, but I'm actually from South Carolina. So I get to see greenery. Not that I'm saying anything bad about New York, but I get to see greenery as well in big backyards. So, well, great. As far as the people that work with you, work for you, are you following the sun? Where are your people located as well?
So we have engineers. We're an open source company, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So we have some really great open source engineers that are located in the EU. And then we have engineers that are located near San Francisco. So really, we're getting code written, even for a small company like ours. We're really pushing code all hours of the day. But it really takes developing these asynchronous workflows, approvals, and management styles in order to get some of this stuff done. And it's something that our team is really great at.
Good. So let's come back to TestifySec in a little bit. But I told you that I really like to try to understand the people that I'm interviewing and kind of what led them to today. So background in engineering, background in U.S. history. I mean, I've heard everything over the past couple of years. So where'd you get started that eventually you end up here?
Yeah. So I started tinkering around with computers, hacking around with my TI-86 calculator back, when I was like 10, 12 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really caught the bug back then. That's how I spent a lot of my summer nights, right? Hacking away and doing various things and learning. But, when I graduated high school, it was 2000 and I went to school, was studying engineering, and then 9/11 happened, right? And my father had been in the military. My grandfather had served in Korea, right? So I really felt this call to service. So I spent the next 12 years of my life as an infantryman in the U.S. Army. I deployed to Iraq in 2005 and then Afghanistan in 2010. So really nothing to do with engineering, right? I still was in fulfilling my passions on the side with technology, but really my focus was in the military and making sure that my soldiers got what they needed and we were able to achieve them and we were able to have mission success.
Right. And really the only engineering that you saw then was Bangalore's. I was infantry as well. So yeah. So it's a small world, much smaller than you think sometimes. But yeah, the engineers I knew were blowing stuff up.
I really like taking weapons apart and putting them back together. Whenever there was a comms problem, they called me, or even like we were in Afghanistan and we wanted to get satellite internet on outpost a kilometer away from the Pakistan border, right? Like we could do all these things because there's the technologies available. And then myself, as well as some other individuals on our platoon that knew some of this stuff. So it was really helpful. And I really was able to use some of my skill sets to really help enhance that mission, which was fun. But really that wasn't really a way to raise a family. So when I got out, I had to move in a different direction. So I got selected for special forces. So I spent about 2 years at Fort Bragg during that time, I met my beautiful wife, and she got pregnant during that time, and
Mhm.
kind of came to a point in that course where I had to decide, did I want to redo something I didn't do so well at, or
Yep.
maybe a direction. And at that point, I didn't want to be deployed anymore, right? I
Mhm.
want
Yeah.
my wife, I want to raise my children. So I kind of threw in the towel and said, hey, let's move on to something else. So I actually finished my degree at Fayetteville State University, a local
Mhm.
university. And about a year and a half later, after an internship at the Naval Research Lab, awesome, by the way, I got to work on swarming algorithm for drones, which is really cool. I went from there to work for Joint Special Operations Command, helping
Mhm.
them build mission command applications for the intelligence community, which kind of went full circle, right? I got to combine my love of technology as well as my desire to serve our country and to meet our national interests.
Cool. So where are we in timeline at that point? You're working with JSOC, and is this? I'm assuming at this point you're not to testify sec, or are you?
No, I'm pretty green at this point, right? I'm a new engineer. I understand a lot about people, which helps you, right? So I
Yeah.
was able to move up pretty quickly. And I led a team that was developing, this was about 2015, led a team that was helping develop an application to share information between different partners, right? Different countries, and how to do this in a secure way. And we actually went to go deploy this application. It's really important. So they sent me a week before Christmas to Jordan, and the problem was that this network was different than the US network, not in a physical manner, but just the compliance requirements, right?
Mhm.
So while this application was certified to be deployed on US networks, it was not certified to be deployed on a NATO network. So I actually spent that Christmas away from my wife and my daughter and completely failed that mission because we didn't have the correct compliance paperwork. Right. So this is where kind of that itch started, right?
Mhm.
How do we deliver applications into these high compliance environments quickly at the speed of relevance? Right. And that's when I started looking at DevOps, right? DevOps is supposed to be the answer to all this. I don't know if you remember back in 2015, but this is back when Kubernetes was really kind of starting to take hold, right? And so I thought DevOps is the way you do this, right? We have these immutable documents that say this is how this thing is supposed to go, and we can replicate this over a lot of different infrastructure. So I left my job working for Novetta, worked for Joint Special Operations Command, and went to go work for a startup boutique DevOps consultancy called Boxboat. And I ended up leading the defense business for that company. We worked on various programs like DoD Platform One. We worked with a major financial organization, equipment manufacturer, right? And they all had the same problems that I experienced working for Joint Special Operations Command, is that, right, deploying software to highly regulated systems is very difficult. You can have all the DevOps processes there, but if you don't have a way to easily audit and verify those processes,
Mhm.
they'll have this manual workflow, right?
Yep.
We actually ran into this at Platform One, right? They were trying to automate they're trying to automate the release process for all their software, right? And when you think about it, if it's like an application that's going to serve like a lunchroom menu, right? We can do this. It's not that hard to do with DevOps processes. But now the problem becomes much more difficult when you're talking about how do you do this for something like a nuclear weapon system?
Fair.
Yeah. Or the requirements around nuclear surety and how that's supposed to be certified, it's not compatible with a DevOps process or a traditional DevOps process, right? Because you have these out of band requirements these out of band certifications that need to happen.
Mhm.
It just wasn't compatible with what they were doing. So this is when my co-founder and I, we reached for this tool called In-toto. It's a CNCF project, open source. And I think it's like 2000 or 2019 is when the original In-toto paper was released.
Mhm.
You read that paper, it solves this problem, right? It allows you to certify processes, whether it's a DevOps process, AI model development process, et cetera, by collecting evidence at every step of that process, assigning an authority who is allowed to sign that process, right? Whether that be a machine identity or a person identity. And then you can verify all this with a policy. So read this paper. Okay, let's put this in at Platform One, because I think this is going to allow us to include external approvals from the Nuclear Surety Authority into this existing process that we have, right? It's a signed metadata document that we can evaluate. So we start doing this and it doesn't work, right? In-toto is really great. And if you read the paper, it works really well. But when you actually start to implement, just like I think when we talk about a lot of open source, there's a lot of rough edges around, right? It's not
Yep.
designed for the enterprise, especially these academic projects, right? They're designed to prove out a concept. So Mikhail and I, we started working on that open source In-toto project and added some enterprise features around key management and some other stuff. But this time, actually, the company Mikhail and I were working for was sold to IBM. And I think IBM does some great stuff, but it's not where Mikhail and I wanted to spend our energy, right? We thought there was a lot of promise around this In-toto framework. So we started TestifySec with the purpose of developing an enterprise version of In-toto that allows organizations to verify any type of process, right? It solves this problem. How do we verify that the DevSecOps process actually happened? So that's where TestifySec was founded, kind of in the ashes, or not the ashes, but I don't know what do you call it when the company
When
gets
there's
sold.
acquisition, I'm not sure, but ashes and nuclear didn't seem to go well together. I don't know
No,
what.
no, right. So yeah, we started TestifySec and we spent about 2 years bootstrapping it
Mhm.
on building out that open source. Yeah, and that's about where we are now.
So, obviously, in some place like a nuclear reactor, there's probably a lot of compliance. And is that then a natural thought to go, what else is, what other industries are compliance laden that we could get into that really, like, it is the whole point, I guess, for you to find either companies or industries that, and maybe I'm seeing also too what definition of compliance is, but the long and short of it is, why go into financial services sector? It seems like you were in spaces that were obviously had to be secure, but were, let's say, national interest or I guess more government type interest as well. So you joined FINOS. Why do you want to get into finance?
Well, I think if you look at the compliance requirements around shipping software to a nuclear system and shipping software into a bank, I think a bank might be harder.
Touche.
And when we started working on this problem with In-toto, we actually started working with Jonathan Meadows. He's over at Citi. He spent a lot of time with us working on the CNCF software supply chain best practices.
Right.
And that's where we really started to realize this box, but we had a lot of customers, right? It wasn't just defense.
Yeah.
Defense was just a small portion.
Okay.
Right. And so when I was at Boxboat, we really saw that this problem was pervasive across all these high compliance industries. And they had the processes, or at least a lot of them had the process in place to ship software fastly, to develop software fastly, but to certify that software and to be able to audit that software, right? That was just very difficult. So what we saw was a lot of hand waving, right? Where those processes were, if they're really advanced, they would be like in a ServiceNow, right? But most organizations use tools like email, Jira, Excel to track the status of artifacts and their compliance requirements. This is just really slow. It doesn't work at scale. Whether you're the DoD or you're the largest bank in the world, right? You really want a better way to track these processes. And that's where In-toto comes in, right? It gives you that API in order to do that.
Okay. Go ahead. No, keep
So
going.
I was going to say, and that's true across all these industries, right?
Right.
And right now the focus is on these high compliance industries, but we really think just like Kubernetes might have been really expensive to deploy in 2015. We kind of see the same thing with DevSecOps, right? It's really expensive to do here in 2024, but really over time, the tooling around In-toto and associated frameworks is going to improve where I think other organizations, much smaller in scale, are going to be able to adopt this. And they're going to need to, right? I think if you look at some of the requirements that are coming down from the White House with EO 14028, SSDF, right? These are going to make their way into the requirements for financial services as well. We're already seeing they've made their way the requirements for DoD software providers, right? Or federal software providers in the form of a self-attestation form.
So good. We're in financial services. And then I kind of want to get past security, but get into an area that I see for banks is going to be, even though they've been working in it for a while, even though and let's even take out the open source side of things, is obviously on everybody's mind, from marketing to on up to government to security to banks to everywhere. And as I've started to look at AI in relationship to what the banks are dealing with right now, I'm kind of seeing, so going back to security and where you've been building to, I'm kind of seeing that banks have to deal with AI on a couple of different levels. They've got to deal with it on the technology level in the first place, like, how do we implement this into our systems, whether it's a GDP or it's a little bit bigger than that. There's that technology element. There's the security element. How secure is this? Where is it coming from? What can it do? What can it do? Where are the vulnerabilities? And then finally, this is somewhere that's kind of in between. Like, I kind of feel like I keep reading that AI is still at a place to where I don't even know that the engineers know that why the AI is doing what the AI is doing. And that seems to be something that, so then there's that element for a bank. So I know recently that you guys joined the AI readiness SIG at FINOS. That was a long way to get us there, honestly. But so I'm seeing some of the security side of things, but can you talk in relationship to what you focus on a daily basis, and then what you're seeing in financial services and with the banks and the security, the technology, and then just the, like, what this thing is? I wouldn't say like, why'd you get involved? I can understand for sure, but tell us your involvement. Tell us what you're wanting to do, where you're wanting things to go, and how you think you can be helpful, I guess.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to In-toto. If we think about the properties of this framework, right, it allows you to attest to steps of a process, like who, what, when, where of a process. So an AI model is a series of steps, just like built-in software. I think the difference with AI, though, instead of using source code for inputs, right, we're using raw data.
Mhm.
And that presents some challenges to organizations, right? Because I think the risk defined around data leakage is very well defined, right? We know what happens if we're an organization that has controls over our data, regulatory controls over our data, and we leak that data, right? There's going to be consequences involved in that. So these organizations, financial organizations, spend a lot of time making sure that their data is secure so they don't have to face these regulatory burdens or the regulatory consequences. So
Right.
if you think about an AI model, what an AI model is a representation of the data that you train it with. So if you're exposing that AI model to a customer, you should probably be sure that does it contain any data, or was it trained with any data that customers shouldn't be privy to. And this goes back to data governance. And how do you track data governance through this process where, all that data is now opaque? You can't track it. You lose that tagging of it. And I think In-toto really provides a lot of the answers around that, and how you both track that data that goes into the model and how you can validate that model went through the right conformance processes, making sure there's no bias in that model, right? There's a lot of things that we need to do with these AI models, but in order to sure that process was followed and the correct data was used in that model, that's really where In-toto comes in. And it provides a framework for you to cryptographically validate these models and their usage.
And you're right. That was actually number 3. I think I even said technology twice. Regulatory concerns. That's what banks care about.
Yeah. I mean, you can never be 100% secure, right? So that's why we have compliance frameworks and kind of direct us into where we need to put our efforts into, right? And that's why there's so much regulation around data governance. And I think when we're looking at AI models in these highly regulated environments, it should really go back to that source data and use that as okay, this data should not be released to the public. So we're not going to include that in an AI model that is used to support the public. And
Gotcha.
having strong controls over that is really important.
I was going to ask you, how do you cleanse that? Or is that just you have to have a guideline for the data before it goes in?
I think we're figuring out a lot of this stuff, right? We're figuring out how these AI models can be protected. But really, there's been a lot of attacks on models that show that it's very easy to extract data out of it, right? Raw data, right? So we have to protect that source data and make sure that if it's not supposed to be included in that model, that we don't include it, and we can validate that to prove that to our auditors.
Okay. So I wonder if you might want to talk about, so I can see a, particular bank building their own models that they train off of, and everything that they do is they keep it internal. There's less of an issue versus I kind of want to bring the open source side of it into, which is something that is maybe the next phase of the AI readiness SIG. Again, that SIG is really not even addressing the open source side of things right now. It's just addressing the how do banks deal with AI. But, like if everything they're doing is internal, are there security concerns that maybe we're not thinking of versus what happens? I'm not even sure what the use case is to where you have things outside of the bank in an open source area.
Even just publicly internal to the bank, right? If you have 100,000 people working in an organization, right, you need internal security controls. Otherwise, that stuff is effectively public, right? You have that many eyes on it. But it's really like any data set, right? If you want to use that data set in an AI model right now, I think a lot of organizations are just saying, hey, let's just go do it. Don't worry about tracking the data so much. In the financial services industries, I don't think y'all have that ability to do that, right? You have really strong regulatory requirements. So it's
Right.
How do we track the flow of this process? How do we assert that we didn't include some information in this model training that wasn't supposed to be included in there? And how do we prove to our auditors? So we don't even have to be talking about LLMs, right? We can talk about models that have been used for a long time for fraud detection. How do we know that fraud detection is conformant and that's a correct model? How do we prove that to our auditors? Right? There's internal testing that happens on those models to make sure that they're working as intended. Right. So just like with software, we want to certify these test results and keep an accurate audit trail of it. I think the same goes with AI models, right? We want the ability to trace the provenance of those models and the processes that they went under and the testing that they went under. And that's really where the In-toto framework shines, right? Whether you have we don't want to prescribe how you manage your data throughout your organization and who sees it and who's not. We want to give you the tools to allow you to do that in a secure manner.
Where do you, considering, I'm not going to say, but in the public view that we've only really been dealing with AI in the past year and a half, as far as a normal on the street person might think, but let's talk maybe timelines. AI, banks, security, just, I want to kind of have it open. Where do you think we're going in the next year or 2 years from now?
I think we're going to figure out a lot of stuff that we need to do, right? If there's a lot of compliance frameworks coming out around AI, some of them are good, some of them not so good. Some are just regurgitating other stuff. I think there's going to be a lot more consensus on the data controls that we need to have with respect to AI models. And that's probably the first step, right? It's where are we allowed to use these things and how do we protect the data, the inputs and the outputs and out of these things? That's probably going to be the next year. I think it's going to be a while before we see these things in use en masse just because of all the compliance and regulatory concerns.
Okay.
Just moving so fast. So I think you'll see organizations using it in certain areas, but to be pervasive across the whole org, right? Tech takes a little bit of time to move in these large organizations. And there's a lot of questions that are looming. And that's why we've joined this AI readiness group, right? Is to try to figure out what some of the answers are to it, right? What parts of the process do we need to protect? What types of things do we need to have controls over? How do we collect the information to enforce these controls? And that's really, I think, the focus of this group is to figure those things out, and then provide a technical implementation to show that, hey, yeah, not only can we give some guidance on how to do it, but we're also going to show you too with some examples and some open source leveraging frameworks such as In-toto, for example.
Cool. Do you think that we can start to build some standards around this, like that are going to be hard and fast, or is AI going to move so fast that it's going to be harder to come up with a standard that sticks?
Well, maybe AI can help us move faster too. That's the point of it, right? I think Yeah, it's going to be different. Like with every new technology, it just creates increases the pace of innovation, right? When we had the DevOps revolution, now we can deploy software a dozen times a day. Easy, right? When we have a really great implemented system. We get a DevSecOps system now, we can have some reporting over on that and we can move faster, right? We have some AI tools that allow our developers to write code faster, maybe do more code review faster, right? We can move faster there. So it all just comes together to allow us to move faster. Yeah, we are going to need to develop these standards faster. We're going to have to figure out ways to move the regulatory and the compliance functions of organizations along faster. And really, I think that comes down to communication, right? How do these teams communicate with each other? How do we communicate what the data scientists did, what types of data they use, what types of data sources they pulled from to make these models? Maybe there's a conformance team that's working on conformance testing for AI models. How do they communicate with the CISO on what they've done, what data sets they use to do the conformance testing? Right. Just like with DevOps, right? We have APIs that say, hey, this is how we deploy an application to production, right? That's Kubernetes or Terraform, Ansible, right? When we talk about DevSecOps or security with AI models, right? We also need an AI, we also need a API for that. And that's where In-toto comes in. It allows all these teams to communicate together and to really move faster. Right. And yeah, you're right. We're going to need to move faster. We're going to need to figure out how to do that. And having some standardized APIs is one way that we think we can help make that happen.
Well, thank you, Cole. We will put in the show notes the link to the In-toto site that you sent me, and also you had a Google article as well too, right?
Yeah. So a lot of what I talked about with certifying these test results for AI models, right? It is actually Google talked about in a recent paper they published. So I'll send you that link so you can put in the show notes. I forget the name off the top of my head, but yeah, this is not just TestifySec that's thinking about this, right? In-toto is a community with some giants in it that are really working towards this. And we're really happy to bring this technology into FINOS to figure out how we can leverage it with the AI readiness working group.
Very good. Cool. Well, I hope to, maybe if you guys can make it up to New York in September, October for OSFF, would love to see you there. But if not, then I would say continue doing what you're doing. It sounds like you've taken, as everybody has in open source, this interesting route in order to get here. And mine's not dissimilar nor similar, but interesting how you came through the infantry side of things like I did in order to figure out how did I end up here? So very cool. Great talking to you, and looking forward to learning more about TestifySec, looking more to see your involvement in the AI readiness SIG and in the FINOS community. And if you ever need anything, just let me know.
Yeah. Well, we'll probably be there in September. So look forward to meeting you there. And then if anyone's got any questions, feel free to reach out, TestifySec.com, or In-toto. We have a great community Slack in the CNC or community channel in the CNCF Slack.
Very cool. Cool. And I will say this too, that CNCF has a track at OSFF New York this year. So I just sent an email out to the community about 6 minutes before we started talking, saying how we're crossing the stream. So we should see, I hope, a good mix of CNCF folks, FINOS folks combining to learn together. So this is actually very appropriate timing recording this interview. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Make it one big Linux Foundation family gathering.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you, Cole. And with that, I'm going to say good day, good night, wherever you are.
All right. Thank you.